to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have been participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and please return to
Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hey kids, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. It's the Parrot Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. Today we have William F. DeVault. He has been writing poetry since age 8. He's published nearly 30 books, which accounts for approximately 10% of his known catalog. While his work in projective poetry won him citation as the U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate for 2017 through 18. His earlier work caused Yahoo to declare him the romantic poet of the internet in 1996. He has in the past also been named Poet of the Year by the Predators and Editors Online Readers Poll and has been included in the Appalachian Education Initiative's Art and Soul, which named 50 outstanding creative West Virginians who attended public school in that state. He is the founder of controversial literary photography fusion magazine, Emomancies. That's a really tricky word. I hope I got it right. And is currently CEO for publishing house Venetian Spider Press, to which he assigned over the rights to his works. His past books include the massive 633 poem, The Complete Panther Cycles, and his most recent book is Liaison, 2021 Venetian Spider Press, which is a collection of 15 heroic crowns of sonnets, 225 poems total, on aspects of erotic love and passion, written in an intense 31-day writing binge. He writes single draft, claiming that this is the only way to retain the integrity and honesty of his work. Thanks for joining us today, William. How's your day going?
My day's going pretty good. I hope our connection's good. I'm getting a little static at this end.
I think we can pull it through. If we have trouble, we can improvise. So my first question, what is the purpose of poetry in the art world, according to you?
Well, poetry is one of the most ancient of arts. It's when people discovered language, they discovered speaking language in a certain way was evocative, communicative, and if you structured it just a little bit, you don't have to structure it completely, it was more memorable. And I think that's an important thing. I think that poetry today, I'm going to try hard not to say anything that's going to get me in trouble with anybody. I think poetry has been bastardized. That isn't really hard for me. There, but it's subtly. There's a lot of poetry out there that isn't poetry. A lot of monologists, a lot of performance artists call what they do poetry because it lends it an air of high art and legitimacy. It's like if John Travolta insisted he danced ballet, which he doesn't. But it makes it sound a little better. There's a lot. Theodore Sturgeon said 90% of science fiction is crap, but then again, 90% of everything is crap.
I agree.
Much the same way about poetry. Now, on the one hand, the digital renaissance has been a big boon. A lot of people who would have never seen print can log on, put together a book, get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is a lot of people are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of second-rate, third-rate, 42nd-rate books flood the market. And the end result is a casual reader or a discovering reader really doesn't know where to start. And don't tell me to start with the reviews, because we all know that a large portion of reviews are, I'm going to get all of my friends to write reviews for me. And that doesn't say anything about the quality of the work.
Right.
I can be a little bit of a fuddy-duddy in that regard. I like to see quality. I have nothing against experiment, but there's a lot of crap out there. And having for the last few years been running Venetian Spider Press, great anecdote. I was at a poetry conference, and this one young woman walked up to me and said, "I want to put out a poetry book. What do I have to do?" And I said, "Well, do you have a manuscript?" She says, "Well, I've written a poem." I said, "How long is it?" She said, "About a page." Said, "Here's what I want you to do. Go home. Keep writing until you've got 100 poems. Take those poems, put them in your drawer, walk away from them for a month. Come back, read them. Throw out the 90% that you recognize are crap. You now have 10 poems. Now I want you to write and write and write until you're back up to 100. And I want you to go through however many iterations it takes till you know you've got 100 good poems there. And then I don't have to. Just look me up on the web. I'll be happy to take a look at your manuscript." I get a lot of manuscripts that obviously people didn't go through that exercise of self-criticism.
Right.
I get criticized for the fact that I'm a single draft poet. And I used to think I was a freak for that. And then I read an article about a gentleman named George Gordon Lord Byron. Some of you may have heard of him. He said, "I do not change my works. I am like a tiger on the prowl. I pounce, and if I miss, I slip away into the jungle. Most of the poetry I write goes in the garbage.
Right.
It's not good enough. A word, a phrase, a sentence might impress me enough that I remember it and later on reuse it. But for the most part, it's either good or it's not good. And some are iterations of good better than good. I would say about 90% of them go in the trash can, never to see the light of day.
What if they called that the Pareto formula?
Yeah.
9 to 10% ratio.
Right. But the whole reason for that with me is, to me, poetry is like photography. If I take a photograph to capture the sunset, and it's okay, but not great, so I go take it to Photoshop and move that around and change the colors and change the light gradients. It's not the same photo. It's not it's not true. To me, poetry has a moral obligation to be true, because it's good poetry, if it's memorable poetry. 200, 300, 500, 1,000 years from now, people will read it and see it as a reflection of our times and who we were. And we owe it to our own generations and our future generations to be honest. There are a lot of really, really good poets out there. Many of the beats are very, very, very good. Tomorrow is the 66th anniversary. I should have remembered that because he did it 2 months after I was born. 66th anniversary of Allen Ginsberg doing his first public reading of Howl.
About that.
And when I heard it, I thought, I don't agree with what he's saying, but there's a truth there. It speaks. And it's something that needs to be remembered decades later. That's why we have things like the National Beat Poetry Festival. That's why we have, tomorrow has actually been declared, as of about a year ago, National Beat Poetry Day by a different organization than the one that does the festival. There's plenty of room in poetry for there to be more than one organization. But it's important that we remember poetry and that we celebrate it. You don't have to love poetry. You don't have to like poetry. You don't have to like my poetry. Just find something that's true for you, because the resonance is what. And if you let me go like this, I will go for 6 or 7 hours. So I'm going to set up now. I'll let you talk.
Excellent. I actually had another aesthetic question for you. You may not be able to answer this, or you may be able to answer this. Let's see I'll throw it at you and see what you think. I'll put the ball in your court and you can throw it back at me. Do you agree with Nietzsche that all art and culture aspires to music? Why or why not?
That all art and culture aspires to be music?
To be like music, to be like, aspires toward music, maybe would be a better phrase.
Well, there's a circuitous answer to that, and I'll give it as quickly as I can without taking up the rest of our time. Number one, poetry is dependent on structure to make it memorable. Mm-hmm. Whether that structure is rhyme or rhythm or meter or whatever, it needs to be there to make it memorable. Mm-hmm. I've been at parties, people come up to me and say, "Oh, recite me one of your poems." And I say, I have 30,000 poems. Asking me to recite any of my poems off the top is like walking up to Tom Clancy and saying, recite for me a paragraph out of one of your novels. Mm-hmm. He can't do it because without the structure, it's unmemorable. I have about 20 of my poems I've committed to memory for emergencies, but music and poetry share that need for resonant structure. Completely unstructured music is interesting for about the first 5 minutes. And then it's like, why are they doing that? I'll be honest, I'm known to not be a big fan of slams. And not a big fan of spoken word. There were some good people in slams, there's some good people in spoken word, but a lot of it is not poetry. It's, again, the John Travolta saying he's doing ballet. It's people want a greater legitimacy than what they are willing to invest in. Picasso did not start drawing the paintings we know him for. He started doing still lifes and nude figures until he learned his craft. And it's like with language. You learn your craft so that you don't even really have to think about it. The words just come out, like with me right now. And with poetry, you learn your craft so you can sit down, and like with the book Liaison, I challenged myself to put together 15 heroic crowns of sonnets, which for those of you who don't know, means 15 sonnets per crown, 225 poems in 31 days. That Herculean by any measure. Do I claim to be Hercules? No, but it was a Herculean undertaking. It killed me. But
wow,
you have to be able to burn off the BS and speaking in a structure like the sonnet makes it easier for other people to memorize it. Shakespeare wrote just about all of his plays in iambic pentameter. I'm not a fan of iambic pentameter. I have a bad reputation for using trochaic hexameter in my sonnets. I didn't do that for this book, but that makes my lines too long for the average printed page, and I don't like line wraps, so I get into fights with publishers.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I can be a pain in the butt to publishers and editors alike. I had an incident happen in high school. I was avoiding putting my poetry out there, and I was asked to write a poem to go in the school paper because everybody knew I wrote poetry. And I was actually on the staff of the school paper, and I gave them a poem of mine called Contents of a History Book 2025, which now doesn't seem to be that too far in the future. But the first two lines were, "The human race exists no more, wiped out by its chief predator." Features editor swapped them. I saw it getting ready to go to press with those two lines swapped. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" And she said, it reads more newspaper style if you do that. I said, "It goes in the way the artist writes it, or it doesn't go in. It would look more normal with eyebrows. You're not going to paint eyebrows in on her before you make a print of her, are you?" "Well, you're not Leonardo da Vinci." "Yeah, and you're not running my poem." And they ran white space instead of my poem.
Oh, wow.
That's when I started my reputation for being a pain in the ass to editors and publishers.
I had a poet that we published, Henry Seven Renaud Jr., who was very much like that. He was, you run it this way or you don't run it. And he still does that with publishers. And he's got the most integrity of most poets I've known. Excellent poet. We published one of his books, and, he was much, some of his poems ran off a little bit, and he was like, you put it the way I say, or you don't publish. And I really respected him for that.
I mean, projective poetry can sometimes lead to weird things. I mean, projective poetry, which is a huge element within beat poetry, is you don't sit down and go, I'm going to write an 8-line poem. You sit down and go, I'm going to write a poem about my cousin Carl. And you start writing. And you write until you're done writing. And if it's 2 lines, great. If it's 2,462 lines, wow. I've got a poem in one of my books called Diogenes, which is 400 lines long. You don't want to hear me read it because it takes about a month. But no, it doesn't take that long, but it takes a while. For the record, I have some long poems. My longest single reading was 3 hours and 26 minutes. And there's a story behind that which I'll bore you with right now. So anyway, by the way, you're doing very well.
Thank you.
I run up the back and dance on the head of interviewers, which is one of the reasons I tend to avoid interviews. I can be rather chaotic and oppressive at the same time, left to my own devices.
Be a sort of a Luciferian figure of sorts. The devil's on the head of attack, I mean.
In a nice way. I'm a good guy.
If artists aren't being a pain in the ass, what are they being? I mean, lukewarm, conformist. I mean, that's art.
They have to shake things up because a static system has little room for change, but you shake it up so a couple things break or bend or bounce around. Suddenly it can reform. An ice cube doesn't. A glass of room temperature water does. So let's take those ice cubes, turn them into water, not steam, just water, and that way we can pour them out whatever shape we want.
Love the metaphor. So how do you recognize a pretentious artist versus someone with more integrity? As we mentioned, that's a fun question to ask. I mean, I see a lot of the artistic integrity and what you're saying, and I'm just curious. I mean, if you were to have, like you mentioned, a person coming up with just one poem and saying, "I want a book," is that how would you say that would be pretentious or just potential? Or, I mean, there's a lot that say, "Oh, I want to keep my own voice. I don't want to read other poets." Okay, well then don't write.
There are 2 words that a lot of people confuse: stupid and ignorant. Ignorant means you don't know. Stupid means you don't care to find out.
Right.
The person was being ignorant. They just didn't understand what went into the prompt. So I educated them. And to be honest, if she'd gotten back to me a year later with a 100-poem manuscript, and I thought it was any good, would have printed it.
Absolutely.
But on the other, I get people who think anything they can put on the page is poetry. Back again to the DeVault metaphor. I can dance, therefore I'm about. No,
is it salad or is it junk food?
Yeah, I write short fiction as well. I've tried 100 times to write novels. I get about 3 chapters in, and I wander off, and I go, okay, I'll look at that, and I've got those sets of 3 chapters sitting in a drawer someplace. I keep threatening to just publish a novel that's like a whole bunch of 3 chapters that have nothing to do with each other. Which, considering some of the novels that get printed, that's close. I'm not quite desperate enough to be writing like dinosaur porn, but which that makes money. But
just throw the word penis in there and make it kishy. Someone's going to say, "Hey, this is brilliant. You get 100 good reviews, you sell 1 million copies, you're famous overnight."
I don't think I use the word penis in a poem. Many of my poems are erotic or borderline erotic, but I find it more interesting to come up with a way to say it delicately. For instance,
absolutely.
I use the word coit, and people go, "What's that?" I go, "Look in your dictionary." Oh,
Google these days now too.
it's it's fun sometimes. But no, pretentious versus whatever else. Pretense just means you pretend you can do it. You know, it's like the difference between
affectation.
Cocky thinks he can do it. Arrogant knows he can. Mark Twain once said, I believe it was Mark Twain who said, a bird isn't bragging if it says it can fly. I was at a poetry thing several years ago, and one guy said, I hear you can write really fast. I said, yeah. He said, how fast? I said, are you going up to read next? Yeah. I said, well, in your 5-minute thing, I will write a sonnet. I will write it will be in trochaic hexameter. And he's like, bullshit. So he goes up down, there it is written on the napkin. He goes, that's not a sonnet. And sitting next to me was John Horvath, who is the editor of Poetry Repairs and was a college professor teaching poetry at the University, I believe, of Mississippi. And I said, John, what's this? Is that in trochaic hexameter? I said, yeah, but what is it? He said, it's a sonnet.
Wow.
If you can do it, it's not BS.
Right.
Things in this life I can't do. When I was a kid, I said, find the thing you're best at, do it. That will make you happy. And I wanted to be my mom wanted to be a minister. I wanted to be an artist. And I painted, and I was not very good at it, but I was trying. And one day, I've told this story a few thousand times, but one day I was crazy mad in love with a girl who wouldn't give me the time, but our families knew each other, so she'd at least take my calls. I was 17, he was 14 at the time. And I sat down and I wrote her a couple of poems. And I called her up and I said, hey, Joanne, I've written you a couple of poems. Really? Yeah. You want to hear them? Sure. I read them to her. She hung up the phone. Now I'm sitting there going, what did I do? What did I do? 30 seconds later, her mom calls. And I always knew she was mad at me when she called me Billy. Billy, what'd you say to Joanne? Nothing. I just read her some poems. Why? She's in her room with the door locked, crying her eyes out. And the heavens opened. I now knew what I had to do. And since I was 17, I've never, I work in the real world. I have some really intense technical and management jobs over the years. I live a reasonably normal life. My next door neighbor probably doesn't know I write poetry, but that's what I'm supposed to do. And when I die, I will be cremated and my ashes placed in an urn, which merely reads William F. DeVault, poet. Nothing else on it. I know
absolutely
myself.
We're going to take a brief break, but we'll be right back with some of this fantastic heaven opening poetry that you're talking about. Look forward to it, William. Take a brief break. We'll be right back.
watching the New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dustin Pickering with the Literary Corner. Right. And let's hear some poems from William DeVault.
I can't hear you.
Oh, very sorry. Poems. Can you hear me now? Would you like to read a couple of poems? Uh-oh. We've reached the moment of Twilight Zone where you can hear and not hear. Quantum entanglement going on here. Give it just a second, see if maybe we can get William on where he can hear us. Can you hear me now? Is he still there? Maybe we can do another break.
Oh,
there you are. You can hear me now?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you, and I clicked a little button that said, "Can you not hear somebody?" And I clicked it and said, "Hit this to fix it."
It's always a commonsensical solution, right? So let's hear some poetry. Let's have the heavens open before us now with some poetry.
Oh, I can do that. I
Excellent.
Tell you what, I have my full selection of books behind me, and a lot of things that haven't made it in yet. But I'm going to read this evening, if we have time, 2 poems of mine from my next to last book, Tachyon, and then my new book, Liaison. And the first one is in honor of my brother, Robert. He was 2 years older than me. He passed away last September. And he was very close to me. When I was 5 years old, the first nightmare I had was a nightmare where he died. So I felt that shroud. But I believe that death is a celebration. I spoke at both of my parents' funerals and got people to laugh with the anecdotes I was telling. And to me, that was important because people need to embrace the joy of all the cycles of life.
Absolutely.
But this first poem is called "For My Brother as He Accelerates." There are no more mysteries for you. The sky is white, and the night is a dimly remembered joke. Truth is, at last, obvious, and pain is an abstract concept. Afterlife, the all that was held back by the shadows. The memories are there, but less relevant than expected, as you find the frame is not a Sunday school prestidigitation, but words that dissolve like sugar cubes in an April rain, plainly sweet but pure and sure of the vision expanded. I envy you, the awareness and the peace of release beyond any numbing drink or the stink of sorrows borrowed to make you feel less than you were, but more than you imagined. As you emerge, wings formed. The caterpillars mourn their brethren, heathens of the ascension, as the pretension stands as hobbling prevention of freedoms we are heir to, as they wonder why I smiled at your funeral. The mind without the biochemical bounds that inhibit us. There are no more mystery to you. The sky is white and the night is a dimly remembered joke. Truth is, at last, obvious, and pain is an abstract concept. Afterlife is the all that was held back by the shadows.
I think that stands alone for me. I really can't add to that in comments. I can say that to me, it's very much a sort of scientific way of looking at what death and the afterlife may potentially be. It's it's beautiful, it's thoughtful, and it has a lot of inherent scientific note to it. I would say, excellent work. Thank you for sharing that.
I was a science nerd as a kid. And,
yeah, me too. Dinosaurs.
I went through dinosaurs, planets, chemistry, although my older brother was the chemist in the house. I once dabbed because I had found out the secret why he couldn't make nitroglycerin. He had all the chemicals, but there's one thing you have to do in the formula, which I won't reveal here because then government agents will come breaking down my door, but
Yeah.
I demonstrated for him, and he was blown away, and he never figured out what he would. The guy must have blown himself up more times than I can count. I mean, he had scars from chemical burns and stuff like that. But I loved him.
Yeah, absolutely.
To quote Merlin in Excalibur, it's easy to love fallen child. And in some ways, he was the irresponsible side of me. I was the responsible one. So.
Wow. Interesting. So let's hear the next poem.
You hear another one?
Yeah, absolutely.
This one probably serves as a bridge from the first one to the third one, because it's a little bit about death, but it's also a lot about love. The first girl I ever fell in love with, we stayed together for almost 6 years, and we broke up when she asked me to give up poetry.
No good.
I thought about her request. Well, my mother had talked to her and said, he needs to give up on this poetry stuff. He'll never make a living at it. And she asked me, and I said, let me think about it. And 3 days later, I called her up with a poem I wrote called Threnody for Times Now Past, in which I canceled our engagement. Sad for years afterwards to have to walk away like that. But I had to choose between the two things I loved most in life. And it was a close call. But a few years ago, I was bopping around the internet and I happened to plug in her name and I found a reference to her. Her husband, who I had met right after they got married, last time I ever saw her, had passed away 15 years ago. And I had not heard from her in all this time. And it was kind of sad because I'd always thought that we were close enough friends that I would have heard about it, but I hadn't. And this poem came out. It also talks about a lot of other topics. A lot of my poems I call meanders. They wander all over the place. This one's definitely a meander. It's called Resurrect. Laying down a beating where I'd been eating crow. The blows are soft flesh on shattered sapphire. Too many business cards from timid MFAs. Mediocrities polluting Apollonian streams of consciousness. I'm sorry that your husband died. I acknowledge that you loved him, and he you, and I am grateful you found joy to your own side of the pillars of Heracles. The fates did not hate us, but allowed us to stumble in blind bindings until we crumbled under the weight of our best pretensions. Cornbread corners to the hollow plates of desire. I was unaware of the demon I found and bound only with your persistent assistance. Born of dragons and chained in cinnabar and pitchblende, pitchfork tongue and the dung of desecration, left in the garden, he calls for you from within his cell, where I starve him with distractions and abstractions while awaiting the resurrection in a reinvented winter that comes for us all, calling us liars as the fires fade and we are paid up beyond the end of the stay we had envisioned when we bought the condoms. The halls and walls are as I envisioned them, described in the romantic's whispers, using words unheard in the most ancient places, where the Greek girl said I would find redemption. She was wrong, but drunk most of the time. And I do not lay with the mysteries of Dionysius. Fire, fire, fire. Inspired desire conspire with the smaller mind blinded by a scent of honeysuckle and the night blooming jasmine, reeling at the feeling of a greater death of self beyond logic and the toxic remembrances that are mangled and tangled. I gave up science and the truth of numbers. I found that I would always be bound by lesser minds, finding no freedom to discover, to uncover the essence of this transient life.
I almost think of the poem by Ginsberg, Wells' Visitation, the way he flows and goes from place to place in that poem. That's just my initial response.
I think that's an earnest response. I think that's a very earnest response to it.
It's beautiful. It's great. It's great.
Thank you very much. but it's all over the place. I mentioned 3 or 4 different people from my life in there. The Greek girl is somebody, not my old girlfriend. And I talk about my ex-girlfriend and her husband and timid MFAs. I've gotten into more than one fight with people who say, you can't write unless you got an MFA.
Oh, that's garbage.
Yeah, I've met some incredibly bad MFAs.
Oh, yeah. And they're producing conformity. They're producing the streamlining the writing process in a lot of ways. It's making it a market, and rather than trying to create creative writers and bring out the natural talents, it's more like, here's the train, get on it.
Absolutely. We end up with bowls of cornmeal mush when we should taste the exotic flavor out there. Last week you had on this program Nick Maciosi. He's an incredible writer. He's been writing as long as I've been alive. And my company, Venetian Spider Press, reprinted his book Why Dance. It had been published, and then the guy who put it out died in a car wreck, so it never got the presentation it needed. And I said to him, yeah, okay, we'll print it. One thing to know, people, if you start looking at the catalog for Venetian Spider Press, we put out hardbound prestige editions. We do not put out 20-page chapbooks. If you want to spend $3 for a high school gibberish, go for it. If you want to spend $20, $30, $40 or something that'll sit on your shelf for the next 50 years and hopefully you'll read it once or twice, that's a different thing. I believe in the cause so much that I signed over my entire catalog of works to Venetian Spider Press. And we'll see what happens down the road.
So what kind of poetic legacy do you hope to leave, and how do you think your life conforms to that? It's kind of a strange question.
No, 1995, Bruce Autry, the editor-publisher of Poetry Haven, review of my first book, Pantheon, and he said, in this time, he may be inexplicable to most readers, but I have no doubt that 500 years from now, a young man will sit under a tree with a young woman and a book of his poetry and win her heart. The heavens opened up again. I went, yeah. The legacy I want is that I was honest and reasonable. Somebody once said, what are you going to name your memoir? And I keep joking that the title of it will be Incompetent but Honest.
I like it.
There's a lot in this life I'm not very. I know I'm good at poetry, and I don't think that's arrogant to say. I've got enough people who've told me that. So unless they're all lying to me in some massive, hey, let's set him up for a fall joke.
Confederacy of dunces.
Anyway, but a lot of my work has theological content. A lot of it has mythological content. People ask me so much about. When I was a kid, when I was a toddler, my dad bought a copy of the Illustrated Junior Classics, which was put out by Collier's. And he would read myself and my brother to sleep for our naps, reading us things like the Iliad, Robin Hood, all these things. So as a result, I probably know as much about mythological allusions as a lot of teachers. And I'm sure it drives them crazy some days here. I didn't know that, there's Sigyn was Loki's wife. Her job was to sit beside him with a bowl, catching the venom of the Midgard serpent as it dripped in his face where he was chained as punishment for all his bad deeds. And once in a while, she had to turn aside to dip out the poison. And during that time, a couple drops would fall in his face. And his howls were so loud, it caused the earth to shake. And that's where they said earthquakes came from. I wrote a poem called Raji to Freya upon his deathbed, which is about me losing my will to live and a beautiful woman reviving me. And people said, but Raji wasn't married to Freya. I said, no, he was married to Idun. But Freya was like the goddess of beauty and of all these things. And to have her walk in and say, get up, and him go, okay, just makes sense. So, anyway, if it's okay with you, I would like to read one of the poems out of the A song. We're not out of time yet, are we? No, we're not.
We're getting really close. I think we can probably fit one more poem in, and then we'll do the conclusion. We'll conclude.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the one of the sonnets, and I'm going to do the diadems. Now, for those of you who don't know, a heroic crown of sonnets is 15 sonnets. A crown of sonnets is 14 sonnets. The last line of the first sonnet becomes the first line of the second sonnet, and so on, and so on, and so on. In an heroic crown of sonnets, there's the 15th sonnet that has the first line from the first 14 poems. It's incredibly difficult to write, especially when you're like putting yourself into a trance state to kind of tap into all your emotional memory. So, like I said, some of these damn near killed me. And if you read the book, you'll see why. They may kill you.
They want to die.
This is from the 12th crown, which is in the crown itself has a title, which is Settle On. And it's really meaningful unless you read the whole book and then you see the titles to each of the things. This is the 15th poem from the 12th heroic crown in the Aeson. Accepting not what was offered in taste of all the pleasant possibilities, when we know there is fresh ambrosia, chaste to the corruption of the low degrees where we are malnourished and neglected from a false sense that we do not deserve to taste the nectar of Olympus, fed only to our betters, withheld to serve the illusion of our unworthiness. But when I touch you, or recall the touch you shared with me, taking that which we bless, confessing hunger for each other, such we are awakened to light and delight as we make memories in sultry night.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So would you like to leave us with some words of advice for our viewers?
If you want to stay sane, get a good job as a ditch digger or a baker. There's an old saying, whoever the gods would destroy, they first make mad. This explains poets. You have to be a little bit. There's very little money in it. I mean, yeah, there are some celebrity poets, but for the most part, they aren't particularly great. Best celebrity poet in recent decades has been Billy Collins, and I don't like all of his work. But I read a poem of his years ago called To a Waterfowl, and it stuck with me. And that's a good measure of poetry. And a few years ago, a gentleman in New Orleans, Penny was his name, said, why don't you write a poem in the form of Billy Collins? I said, and I wrote a poem called I Rained Poetry, because in To a Waterfowl, he keeps repeating the line, I believe it is, I do poetry. And I talk about not an action for poetry, because to me, poetry is not an action. It's a nature of being. It's releasing it from your body. And it's actually a decent poem. But I was stunned because I'm not that big of a fan of Billy Collins, but he has done a few good pieces, and it helped me to reconsider him. I quit reading poetry for many, many, many years when I started writing poetry. I had read so much, and not just poetry, up until my late teens, because it's part of a trial program to get us to all speed read. So I buzzed through almost all the classics by the time I was 16 or 17. And then I was afraid of the Mozart effect, whereas you've been playing the piano, composing on the piano, and you've never heard Mozart. And one day somebody plays you Mozart, and one of two things happens. Either you start imitating Mozart, getting rid of your personal identity, or you start shutting out Mozart, anything in your work that was like Mozart, because you don't want to be accused of being like him, giving up once again who you are. So I just quit reading, particularly poetry, for over a decade, until I was comfortable that I knew my voice well enough that I could endure that. Freakish yet, but it's me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today, William. It's really been an exciting conversation, and we really, I hope our viewers got a lot out of hearing your poetry and your thoughts and all, and your experiences with literature, and very fascinating stuff, interesting, and I love the tonality and the wisdom of your work. So I love hearing them. So I'll definitely keep an eye out for more of your work.
All right. Thank you so very much, Dustin. You have a great program here. You've had some good people on. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. So this has been Parrot Literary Corner, and I'm Dustin Pickering. We had William DeVault today. I hope you enjoyed the program. If you'd like to donate, anybody out there can throw some money at us. We have a nice collection basket on PayPal, paypal.me/nyparrot. That's paypal.me/nyparrot. It's a wonderful collection basket for all of the money that you have that you don't know has a home. So please throw it our way. And also, if you want to be on the program and you want to do some risky venture here, and it doesn't cost a thing, and it gets you a little bit of notoriety, you can get in touch with me at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. And Dustin Pickering is my name, as you see there at the banner below. And we'll definitely schedule you in and make you our chief advantage and a wonderful person. And we'll build you up and make you look like a Greek god, sort of like Rupi Kaur, maybe. If we can try our best. So if you have been watching the program, please subscribe to our channel. It's an excellent way to be in touch with today's literary world globally. We are the best and only TV station offering a global platform for literary minds. So again, please be in touch with me for any related issues with this program, especially if you don't like me. I'd love to hear that. I love hearing when people don't like me. That makes me really excited. But get in touch, Literary Corner at newyorkparrot.com. So thank you again for joining us today, William, and I hope we have a pleasant afternoon. And thank you, and have a great afternoon, great day, great riding experience. And don't get hit by any motorcycles or flying monkeys or any of the weird things that are out there today. So have an excellent afternoon, guys. We're going to go ahead and close the show, I guess. So let's hear the ending station. Thank you very much. After an afternoon. Let's go for it. Parrot TV's Literary Corner. Take care. The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for